Today is Monday, April the 11th, 2011. And this is the start of an interview with Mrs. Gertrude Johnson Korth at the RSVP offices of Catholic Services of Macomb, located at 26238 Ryan Road, Warren, Michigan. Ms. Korth is 88 years old. She was born August the 23rd, 1922. Ms. Korth currently resides at 24674 Lake Meadow Drive, Harrison Township, Michigan. My name is Dave Brousseau, and I will be the interviewer, and Gary Miglia will be the videographer. Mrs. Korth, would you state for the record the branch of service you were in?
I was in the Y.
That's Army.
Yes, it is.
That's Army, okay. You were talking earlier about how you got started with the service, and I'm sort of interested to get you to repeat that for me. You enlisted.
Yes, I did.
We don't have many enlistees. Most are drafted or chose a service branch, then had to enlist. When did you enlist, and why did you enlist?
I enlisted because I got unhappy with my dad and decided to join the Army. And that's exactly what I did.
When did you enlist?
You know, I
The
can't...
year?
Hmm?
The year?
I gotta think back. I was 19, let's see, I got out in 46, and I was in 2 years, so it was 43.
My goodness, right in the middle of the war.
Yeah.
What did you know about the war at that point? Were you conversant with what was going on, or were you aware of what was happening?
Of course. I had two brothers in the service at that time.
Where were they?
One was in Australia and the other one was in Hawaii. We had correspondence all the time. I knew what was going on. I thought everybody did.
No. No, as a matter of fact, most of them aren't, or weren't. So it's interesting that you would say what you did. Well, let's go back a little before that. Maybe give us a little bit of history on your family and where you went to school, and then how you got to the point where you enlisted.
Well, I'm one of 8 children. I had 6 brothers, and 5 of them were in the service.
My goodness.
3 in World War II and 2 in the Korean. I went to school in Jersey City, New Jersey, and then we moved down to Camden, where I graduated from high school. And I went to a vocational school to learn how to be a machinist, and had a job as an apprentice toolmaker when I enlisted in the service.
How long were you working as an apprentice?
1.5 years, 2 years.
Yeah.
And when I went in the service, I really wanted to learn how to type and work in an office, but my mechanical aptitude was so high, they decided to put me in motor maintenance.
Yeah. And I would guess there would be a big need for that at that time.
Well, I took the place of the man, and so that he could go into active duty, and I was in motor maintenance as a machinist.
And where was this?
In Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. It was a 3rd echelon.
Now, explain for us, if you enlisted, did you go with the same people, the men, when you enlisted?
No.
Or was there a separate corps like the WACs
It was
that
separate.
you had to go to?
We had to go to.
Okay, so when you come in, to be like the men, you went to the WAC corps as opposed to the regular route that the men went.
Up until then, it was a woman's auxiliary. And when I went in, it became the Women's Army, the WAC Corps.
Now, that would have been comparable to the Waves, which were the Navy, and
Right.
what was the Marine Corps? What'd they call them?
I don't even
remember
care.
myself.
I don't even care.
Oh. So, what did WAC stand for?
Women's Army Corps.
So that was before the Air Force split too?
Yes.
Okay. So, you enlist. What did your folks have to say about that?
Nothing.
Goodbye?
Yeah, that was it.
Nice to have you around.
No, they were proud that I went
Oh,
in.
good.
And they, as I said, I had, at that time, I had 2 brothers that were drafted, and it was okay.
Now, there was a rule that came by down the pipe, and I'm not sure when it happened, but it was in World War II, where the 5 Sullivans were on the same ship, and it went down, and then they changed that and said they weren't gonna send members of the same family, I believe, to the same location. They'd split them up.
True.
So, is that what happened with your brothers? Or was that before that rule?
I don't know whether it was before that rule or not, but with my brothers, it all depended on what their talents were,
Yeah.
and when they went in, where they were needed.
And what were their areas of specialty?
Well, my oldest brother was in the South Pacific. He was a first sergeant. He became a first sergeant, but he was in anti-aircraft things to start with. And he spent time on the different islands, and I really don't know what you would call his job, but
Okay.
he used to parachute down onto the islands before anybody was there and make
Okay, so
and
he was
make
part of
maps
the parachute group.
and make
Okay.
maps and be sure that they knew what anybody was going to.
So then the other brother was in the European theater?
No.
No?
My other brother was in Hawaii because he was a mechanic, machinist, and he
Oh.
worked on airplanes. He was in the Air Corps.
Okay, you go to boot camp. What can you tell us about your memory for your boot camp experience?
It was just like any boot camp. We got up every morning and we did all the physical things and,
Marching and,
oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah, we did. And had to be it was in Kentucky.
mhm.
We were there. And it was just what you would, well, I expected, was the physical things and so
Yeah.
on. Yeah, that's all. There was nothing.
Rifle range and,
No,
no?
the Wax didn't have rifles. We didn't have anything like that. We were not.
Now that I think about it, you weren't allowed to go into battle at that time.
No. We were there to do the jobs. in the
Typically
offices
laid
and
out
so
for
on. Right,
Nursing,
yeah, we
okay,
did.
medical, I should call it, maybe,
But none of the Wax went into combat. The nurses might have been in the areas, but they
Yeah.
were not in combat.
some of the women were allowed to fly planes, but that was to usually take them from where they were built to an embark station where they were gonna be sent where they're gonna go.
Yeah, I have no idea about that.
Okay.
I don't know a thing about it.
So how long, do you remember how long you were in boot camp?
No. I
6,
don't
8
know.
weeks?
Well, probably.
Mhm.
I don't really remember.
Were there certain skills that showed up at that point, which decided where you were gonna be sent?
No.
No?
The skills were, at that time, were by the forms you filled out, what you did, what you knew how to do, and what you did before you went in.
Okay, after boot, where did they send you?
To Camp Kilmer, New Jersey.
Okay,
I requested to stay in the Second Service Command.
what does that mean?
That meant I wanted to stay in New Jersey. because that's where my family was. My mom would be close to my mother.
Oh, I see what you mean, okay.
With all my brothers gone, I thought I'd better be close.
Yeah, yeah. So what was your job there?
In Camp Kilmer,
Yeah,
I worked in a machine shop. I relined brakes, I repaired water pumps, I repaired clutches. I did everything the men do in the third echelon. The third echelon is not like the motor pool, nor is it rebuilding engines, it's in between.
uh-huh, oh, I see.
We repaired the parts that went on the vehicles. That's what I did.
Is this where that tab came up about Rosie the Riveter?
Oh,
You remember that?
Oh, sure, I remember Rosie the Riveter, but that, when I went to school and learned how to be a machinist, I could have learned how to be a riveter, and that, they taught people how to, the women how to be riveters and so on. Same as I learned how to be a machinist.
I see. I guess the logic was that any non-combat function that you could perform freed up a man to
That's true.
go to the front.
That's right, because I had to wait for a man to move out of my class to get their stripe. I came under the men's tee-up. Therefore, I couldn't get a corporal stripe or a sergeant stripe until there was one available
Oh,
from the
my
men.
goodness. How did you feel about that?
Well, I was used to men.
Yeah? You want to tell me what you mean by that? There was a
I
certain...
had six brothers.
Okay,
And
I see what you're
in the
going.
service,
Mhm.
I was the only woman that did that.
Uh-huh.
And all the mechanics that worked, and most of them were civilians, they repaired the cars and the trucks.
Mhm.
And I just helped the men in the machine shop do the parts.
Mhm.
It was all men.
Did you like doing what you were doing?
Yeah. I like doing something different that other
Okay.
women can't do,
Yeah. Did you get pretty good at it?
of course. Mhm.
Now, life then sort of became fairly normal for you. You would do your job during the day, and did you live on base, or did you live still at home, or?
Oh, no, we lived on base.
Uh-huh.
We had to.
Mhm.
It was only an hour to get to go to my mother's. I could
Oh.
go there on a Class A pass.
I
But
see, okay.
no, I worked and went, after dinner, we went on back to the barracks to do whatever we did.
Now, I've never been to Camp Tillman, so I don't know what that's all about. Can you give us a sense of, was this a base almost dominated by women, or were there?
No. There were only 3 barracks of women. It was a port of embarkation and debarkation. So the troops came in for a 2-week period before they went overseas for the obstacle courses and learning all of those things. And then when they came back, if they needed hospital, we had hospitals there, and they would come back and go on to a place for their departure of the service. So that was what it was.
How big a medical facility did you have?
I have nothing to compare it to,
Mhm.
so I don't know.
But the men that came back and were assigned there were probably those that could be handled by whatever facility you had.
No, they were there temporarily and then moved on.
Okay.
Usually they would go closer to their home and so on when they got discharged or had to go to the hospital.
Were you able to keep track of what was going on in the war at the time that you were there? I imagine they'd have some kind of a base organ of some kind that would circulate around telling you what's going on?
Well, we had newspapers, and
Yeah.
we had the movies, and we had all those things. We could keep up with what was going on, and of course, they talked about it.
Yeah.
They talked,
Yeah, I remember they would have these newsreels in between the movies, and probably that was 2 or 3 weeks old at that time when you got those movies, but
Well, we had lots of letters going back and forth. I probably wrote to 17, 20 soldiers, sailors, or whatever. Cousins and friends and so on. We knew what was going on.
were you able to keep communication with your brothers?
Sure. Right. As long as they didn't put in there anything that was censored, that's all.
Now, you had 2 brothers when you went in. Did any more of them go in while you were still there?
Yeah.
Okay.
The one that was the weatherman. That's what he did, to see whether or not the planes could fly and so on and so forth. He was down in South America a good portion of his time.
Oh, goodness. What was that like, having your family all split up like that? Did that bother you at all, to not be able to stay in close touch with?
I don't think it bothered me. We were busy.
Mhm.
We were doing things, and the letters kept us in touch.
Mhm.
They didn't come home. My brother didn't come home for 48 months because he was overseas for 48 months. My other brother was in Hawaii for 3 years, and he didn't come home all the time he was there either. So they didn't come home, but my mother was in a mother's group that did all kinds of things to send.
What did they call that group, do you remember?
No, I don't remember.
I remember my mother was in there too.
My mother was also an airplane spotter.
Oh, is that right? That's right, they had a group like that. Well,
My father was an air raid something or other. He had to go because we had a lot of air raids in New Jersey. They didn't have the air raids they thought they were going to have them, and so they would have the alert.
we lived a stone's throw from Selfridge, and number of days or evenings a week, everybody had to shut their lights off, and the mothers would go out and convene and talk about what would happen if there was an invasion. And
Well, in New Jersey, we always had to have the shades pulled at night if you had lights on, and all the cars had the top of the headlights were painted
shades,
black,
yeah.
and there were no lights lit. We had aircraft guns around where we lived because in Camden they had a shipyard, and across the river in Philly was the Navy Yard. So they were really watching for airplanes.
Yeah, we had a fighter squadron, scramble squad at Selfridge all during the war, and I could never figure out, why they had one here. We're a gazillion miles away from the bad guys, so.
Well, they could have flown in.
Sure. Well, there was a certain area of Michigan they were supposed to be protecting, and I don't know what that was, but, I was pretty young and easily impressed by the big bombers that would come in and the fighter squadron. And
Well, with that, the New York shipyard, where they were building battleships and so on, they had to have a lot of protection there. That's the
Yeah.
reason why they had all that anti-aircraft.
Well, part of it may have been due to our close proximity to a foreign country, Canada.
Yeah.
That's still part of our
Oh, yeah, it is.
responsibility,
Mhm.
So you spent the next couple of years doing that.
Yeah.
Anything unusual or any events that came up while you were doing this that were interesting enough that you could share it with us?
No, it was just mundane things. You go to work every day and you do your work and then you get back to the barracks. It's like having it wasn't any different than living
Just
at
having
home
a
and
job.
having a job.
Yeah. When you would go out, let's say on a weekend pass or Liberty or whatever, how'd you feel walking around in this pretty fancy, nice uniform. I mean, that make you feel kind of proud to,
Of course I was proud. We were glad to have, the uniforms were nice
yeah.
and you got some, actually, you got a few privileges if you were in uniform. We could go to New York and get tickets free to go to all the shows. And we were only 30 minutes from New York by train. And there was a service center for women. It was behind St. Patrick's Cathedral. You could stay there for 50 cents a night and you'd get a clean sheet and a clean pillow. And they would give you tickets to go to all the shows if they had them. And
I imagine that opportunity, you might want to call it, provided you some privileges that you might not otherwise not have.
True.
And this was new. I don't know that we had a formal WAC troop of women. They were probably somewhat lesser known before your time.
Well, they didn't like us, the men.
Oh, really?
They didn't think that we were anything. My brother warned me not to even go in.
Yeah.
They, no.
Well, in my recollection, I saw that as something special for women. I mean, I saw them as being something special.
Well, we thought we were, but
And they dressed up really nice. I mean, nice uniforms. They all looked like movie stars to me when I was back then. So, were there any schools other than what you were doing that you had the opportunity to go to improve on your
no,
skills?
I didn't. I don't know that they had any. And if they did, I wasn't interested in it.
All right, let's talk about, you said you got out
I got out in 1946.
46.
Yeah, I did.
All right, tell us a little bit about 45, or what you can remember. Were there any, were you aware of the war starting to turn where it looked like it was going
Sure,
to?
they told us we had information all the time of what was going on. We had meetings and we were told what was going on. We knew when the atom bomb went off and when they were getting ready for it. And so
Well, let's go back earlier. Were you aware of D-Day and coming up with D-Day?
Oh, sure. We were going to go into town to celebrate, but we couldn't get in any of the bars because all the civilians were there.
How did the townspeople treat you? Special?
No,
No?
they treated us nice. In basic training, we were down south and they didn't like us because we were Yankees and we didn't have this southern accent.
Yeah.
And we had a little problems there, but not very much. Nothing we couldn't handle.
Did you go through any exercises on self-defense while you were in boot or later on?
No.
So if some soldier decided to want to have his way with you, you weren't able to flip him over against the wall, or
No, we didn't have anything like that.
did you have any trouble with soldiers trying to take advantage of the women corps?
We all did.
What?
We all did.
To the extent that you didn't like it, or?
Well, right. Well, you have to understand, I was at a port of embarkation. These soldiers were going to go overseas. They didn't know whether they were going to come back or not.
Or conversely, they had come home and they'd been away 5 years or 4.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, I can certainly appreciate that. So when D-Day occurred, what kind of activities went on? I mean, I don't know that D-Day meant really a whole lot because you hadn't done anything other than go land in a foreign country, and there was going to still be another, what, another year before the...
we were all just people.
Yeah.
And they acted the same way as they would if they were home.
Yeah.
They were happy, they were thrilled, and we thought we were beginning to move toward the end of the war and so on. It's the same as anybody being at home. I really never thought that things were that different from just life.
Yeah.
As I said, it's just like.
Yeah, I agree with you. I wasn't as close to it as you were, but I just thought that was life, the way things went.
Mm-hmm.
And I picked up stuff from my parents. I couldn't read, so when my parents got scared, I got scared. When they were happy, I got happy. I didn't know what it meant. I just kind of fed off of them. And being so close to an air base that was fully functional, there was always something going on.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the war was just the other side of town, you know.
Yeah.
But I never thought of it in terms of what a woman who went in, which was unusual back then, how she would see all of this and being closer to it than any of us would be.
Well, I really didn't think it was anything different, as I said, because all my brothers, I mean, I don't.
Wow. Where does your mother have enough windows to put all the stars?
And it was only one thing with all the stars. She didn't have to have a star for everybody.
That was just one little
One flag.
drape, and then
One
all
flag.
the stars would be on it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. The ones I saw had one star, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, they didn't mean much to me other than they had
Just
somebody
long
in the
as it
service.
wasn't, just long as it wasn't gold, it was
Right,
okay.
right. What was it, black or white?
What?
The star?
Gold?
No.
No.
The gold is when there was a death, right?
Right.
Well, what was it if they were just in? Was it black?
No, I think they're just white stars.
White, okay. I don't remember now. I just remember the stars, and
Mhm.
everybody knew that.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you were my age, which was quite young at that time, but. So, the end of the war comes in, what, May? In Europe, was it May or April?
I think it was May.
May.
Right.
And I suppose celebrating, yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Everybody celebrated. Again, they were celebrating at home too.
Now, I imagine there's no let up in your activities because we're still
That's
deep
right.
in the
Yeah.
Pacific theater. And there were plans to take some of the European folks and ship them over there so they would continue to rotate on the other side of the world. You remember the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure.
I don't remember that.
And some of the men that worked there repairing the vehicles knew all about it because they came into where I was working and told us they had been waiting for it to go because they knew that there was one ready. I don't know how they knew, but they did.
It's funny, I remember some of those dates, but I don't remember that. I studied it in college, but I'm surprised why I wouldn't have known that, but it's a pretty big event. Particularly the second one, which led to the ultimate surrender.
Right.
I do remember the surrender party over in Pearl Harbor on the Missouri. No, not Pearl. Sea of Japan in the
Yeah.
Japan Harbor. I remember that, but I was still quite young. What do you think at this point now? The war in Europe is over now, and the war in the Pacific is over. and you are still there. What goes through your mind? Am I gonna be discharged? Can I stay?
We had points,
That's right, points. So you had the same thing the men did.
sure. So when we had so many points, then we could have the service, whether the war was going on or not, even
I see.
when it was ending. We signed up for the duration plus 6, but I got married and then got out of service.
Well, now, you didn't tell us about this. Where did you meet this young man? You said you got married and then got out. So you must have met him while you were...
He was in the service.
Oh, he was in the service.
He was, yes, he worked in the ordnance department.
So you met him while you were there, and then you got married before you got out?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where did you go after you got out?
Came to Michigan,
Why did you choose Michigan?
because that's where he lived. That's where my husband lived.
Now, did you go back to the job of machinist?
Really want me to go into that? The UAW wouldn't let me.
You don't have to if you don't want to, but if you want to, I'd love to hear it.
Well, went down and signed up for the 5220. We got $20
Yep.
for unemployment. And there it was an employment place, and I signed up because I wanted to get a job. And they said, I'm sorry, but the UAW does not allow women to set up their own jobs. So they won't hire you. That's it.
I've never heard that before.
You never talked to a woman that applied,
Probably not.
but that was it.
I'll be darned. So that means you were out of the job market?
Well, unless
Unless you want to be a waitress or...
No, actually, I did get a job later. I didn't right away. I had my kids and I didn't work then. Later on, I had to figure some way of getting a job. And I got a job for Diffco Truck. And just doing menial office work. And then a job opening came for order interpreter. That meant that all my experience in the Army gave me a heads up for that job because I knew the parts of a car, I knew the parts of a truck,
Wow.
and I knew all of those
Good for
things,
you.
and therefore I got that job
Wow.
until they went out of business.
I bet you felt good about that, eh?
I did, but the union didn't.
Now, were you a part of the union when you had to take that job?
Yeah.
What do you think was the swing factor there to get you
Well,
into
I
that
was
job
a-
against the union?
I was doing office work, and I had to belong to the union, and then I got that job. I didn't think anything of it too much.
Mhm.
They did. But
I'll be darned.
it did teach me a lot.
I'm sure.
And then I went to work for Bundy Tubing, which is an automotive supplier of tubing. And again, it helped because I knew the parts of an engine and I knew the parts of a truck. Any information you have and any knowledge you have is never lost.
Right.
So that helped
Interesting. I'll be darned.
me a lot.
So was Bundy where you ended up retiring?
Yes.
Let's go back. You get out of the service and you get this 2052.
Mhm.
Did you ever think about going to college on the GI Bill?
Because I had the kids.
Well, you didn't have them yet. You just got out of the service. Did you think about it then?
I did.
Yeah.
I probably should have. I had planned on going to college when I got out of high school.
Well, I'm sure just
We didn't have,
getting married probably made some changes
well,
in
that was
you.
later. I did.
Yeah.
I did. But no, I took one class on the GI Bill, and that was for cake decorating, which is kind of,
Yeah.
but other than that, no, that's all. I just, I don't think I wanted to go to school.
Uh-huh. Boy, you really flamed yourself a road for women.
You know, I had it easy because all the men I worked with were always nice to me, always. When I worked in the tool room, tool maker apprentice, each week a man was assigned to me. I never had a problem with them. I didn't have a problem with most of the men in the service.
Yeah.
They always treated me fine, with respect. I don't know.
Well, I'm sure that had a lot to do with how you behaved too.
Probably. Hopefully.
Yeah. Men can be led.
We won't talk about that.
Okay. So you said you had some children. How many did you have?
Two.
Two?
I have 2 daughters.
And they're doing what now?
Oh, my daughter retired.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I guess that's right.
And, yeah, she worked in Warren Woods Tower School.
Where?
She worked at Warren Woods Tower High School.
Oh,
She was worked with the special needs children. And my other daughter passed away when she was 22.
oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Do you have any grandchildren?
2.
Do you have any great-grandchildren?
2.
Two. And how old would they be?
Great-grandchildren? The youngest one is 17 and the other one is 21.
Are they around here where you can enjoy them?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, great. Now, when you become a great-grandma, is your name change from grandma to great-grandma, or does it still just grandma?
They just call me Gram.
Yeah.
Actually, that's all they call me. Everybody calls me Gram because I'm so old.
Well, I won't call you grandma. Tell us, you're 88 now. What do you think about Gertrude's life, the way it was all turned out? Any regrets, any events that have occurred that made you really proud of things you did? And
I'm always proud of what I do. I volunteer 22 years for RSVP.
RSVP, what is that?
Retired Senior Volunteer Program.
Is that part of social services?
Well, depends on how you look at it.
Okay.
Yep, I've been a volunteer. I started in '88 when I retired.
Well, that's nice. And by the way, we're volunteers too with the Veterans History Project. Any other events that have occurred that are worthy of discussion here?
Nothing. Everything is just normal.
Dave, she had been talking before we started the tape about what prompted her to join the WACs.
Oh, yeah.
Could you tell that story again?
Can you walk us through that story where you had a little disagreement with your dad, which
Well,
then led to your enlisting?
We had a curfew
Oh,
in Jersey, and the girl next door wanted to go to a movie with her boyfriend, and she wasn't old enough, or no, was he? So I went along as a chaperone because I was in my 20s. And when I got home at 11 o'clock, my dad was mad because I was out until 11 o'clock, past my curfew, and he hit me, and I enlisted the next day.
I'll be darned.
Then I went away within 2 weeks. And he didn't know where I was until I sent the card home.
He didn't even know you joined?
I'm John.
Boy, you're a feisty little gal, you know that?
And how old were you at that time?
20?
I was 20, 21. Yeah.
Did he ever tell you he was sorry?
You don't want me to go into my.
Okay. I can't imagine having the sleight of hand to do that, and I've been regretful the rest of my life for that. Anyhow,
Did your mother know that you had enlisted?
What's that?
Did your mother know you had enlisted?
Oh, sure.
So you had told Mom.
Oh, yeah, she knew where I was.
She knew where, and so, he didn't, and she didn't bother telling him either?
No. She didn't. He probably didn't even miss me. We still have
I
4
don't
kids
think
at home.
that's true. Probably just awfully proud and didn't want to say anything, but I'm sure he regretted that. I can't believe.
Yeah, he was proud. He was.
I mean, angry at himself, but then afterwards, I'm sure he became quite proud of you, but sometimes us men have trouble showing that.
I'm just like my father.
Well, now that's interesting that you say that.
I look like him.
Mm.
Yeah.
Did you said that when you were on the job, the men that you worked with, you know, you didn't have problems with harassment or anything? Is that what you said?
Yes, I said that.
Okay,
I did not.
that's good. What about, now you said that a lot of the GIs passing through might have been a little randy maybe?
Mm-hmm.
What did you do to keep from too much unwanted attention from them?
I don't know. You just stay away from you see them, and they were watched. We had MPs all over the place. We had MPs walking around our barracks.
So they would just, if you got wolf whistles, you just ignored them and
Well,
stuff like
that's
that.
true.
Yeah.
But I mean, we had barracks. Stop and think. This is a port of embarkation. They're all going to go overseas. And all the barracks, whether it be WAC barracks or the men's barracks, looked alike. They just got here in camp. They don't know their street. They don't know where their barracks is. And often they get in the wrong barracks. They go in the back door and get in a bed and think it's theirs, and it belonged to one of the WACs. Sometimes they were in the bed. But the MPs couldn't come in to the barracks. And so if one of the men happened to get in the women's barracks, the women had to take him out to the MP. They couldn't come in and get him. And a lot of times it was because they'd been drinking and they forgot what barracks they were in. I mean, there were other reasons why they would get themselves in their predicaments. But they're going overseas. They don't know when they're coming back, if they are.
Yeah.
So that's the reason. You just have to understand how they were feeling and so on, and then you just avoid their problems.
How many women were there on that base, you know?
I don't know. We had 3 barracks of women. And how many people are in a barracks? 80? Something like that. Our barracks were just like the men's. And then when the V-mail closed in New York, they had a lot of WACs there. And when they closed down the V-mail in New York, those WACs, a lot of them came to to Camp Kilmer, and they opened up. They had to take 2 of the men's barracks and turn them into a WAC. So, however many, there's 3 barracks with about 80 women in, and then later on we had 5, so that's how many were on camp. I don't know about the nurses because they were up at the hospital and they were billeted up there.
So that sounds like about 400 women.
Mm-hmm.
I went to school at Rutgers, and after the war, at some point, that property at Camp Kilmer was all turned over to Rutgers University, and actually it became, some of it was engineering campus, and we had some storage facilities for one of the organizations I belonged to, and we kept our equipment, our ski equipment, and it was an outing club, and our tents and stuff in one of the barracks up there. And I remember that going up there, and of course the barracks had been abandoned a long time. Some of the barracks had bars on the windows, and some didn't. And did they have bars on the windows when you were there, or was that maybe something that was added later on?
No, they didn't have bars on the windows where we were, but we had Italian prisoners that were billeted there.
Oh.
They were co-belligerents. They were working with us. In fact, in the machine shop where I worked, there were 2 Italian prisoners. And later, closer to the end of the war, we had, and they were, it was segregated. And the blacks were across the road also. And the Italian prisoners would come to work every day, and they would march in order with their lieutenants and so on, taking care of them. Later, we got German prisoners of war. It was different. Prisoners of war didn't work for us. They didn't want to work for us, but the Italians did. And they had to, they were billeted where the Italians were. And they had to put a fence across the top of the place where they would be outside in their yard, so that they couldn't get over the fence, because they were always fighting with the Italians. I mean, it was a war in there.
Huh.
And yet they had to both work in the mess halls. The Italian prisoners were the ones that were there first, or the co-belligerents is what they were called. And they would work along with the American soldiers. And then when the Germans came in, then they put them in, say, in a mess hall also to work. It was a problem. Now, they could have put the barracks, the bars on the windows over where they were billeted.
Okay. That's probably where they were from then. I always wondered about that, why some of the old barracks had windows on, had bars on them, and why some of them didn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, that's as I said, they were billeted across the street from across the street from us. They were, the black soldiers were quartermaster mostly, and then it was the Italian prisoners, and then the German. But they were not allowed to associate with us at all. We were not allowed to associate with them either.
With the Germans, or with any of the
All
prisoners?
3.
Oh, okay. So the black American soldiers were kind of in the same category as the Germans and the.
But yeah, they were back there was segregation.
Okay.
Were there any black women in with your wax?
No, the black women were mostly in Fort Dix, New Jersey.
Oh, I see.
They had their own place. They were in Fort Dix.
Well, that's a cute way to handle it. Just don't have any segregation, just segregate it by base.
It was segregated.
Yeah.
It really was.
Hmm.
They I'm sure were treated different than what we were.
Mhm.
That's the reason why when you went to interview the other veteran.
Yeah. Yeah. It just surprised me. I mean, it's not that there wasn't racial bias going on at that time. It's just, I was oblivious to it.
Well,
I went to school with some black kids. I played ball with some black kids. It just didn't seem like a big deal. They were all part of the team. But when you get into the business world, as a matter of fact, the first job I got was at a bank. And I heard the president one day, the president of the bank, believe it or not, right in Mount Clemens. Yeah, there's easy ways to get rid of those black bastards. Just pull them aside and tell them without anybody hearing you, and you get around it. I thought, my God, I have never heard of that kind of language.
Mhm.
And it just shocked me.
Yeah. Well, it's a good thing that they don't, everybody doesn't use it now, but
Yeah.
that's the way it was during the war. Definitely segregated.
And to some extent, with different language, they treated the women that way too, in general.
Mhm. Yeah.
And at that time, I suppose I would have been, I was a little surprised that women in the wax, I mean,
Mhm.
just because I never saw that before, it was just new.
Yeah. It was.
But once you got to know them, it,
Mhm.
just like Tom and Harry down the street.
Yeah.
What were most of the other women, the wax, doing? You were the only one who was a mechanic, a machinist?
Yeah. Well, they worked in the offices, and they did the typing. You know, my best buddy when I was in the service, she used to type up the orders, so she knew which group of men were going to go on the next train to go out, and she knew when they were leaving, and because she was typing up orders, and we didn't have anybody in the mess hall. We had first we had our own mess hall with our own cook and so on, and then they moved us to eat with the men, and we no longer had a mess hall, and so that took care of some of the women that were working in the mess hall as cooks and so on. But most of it was office work. Office.
And you were
Oh, actually the bus drivers and were women. Wax drove the buses and the things on post and off post. The ones that you would take into town and so on.
And you became a machinist because you had been doing it in civilian life.
Right.
And how did you get that job?
Well, yeah, you know, same as anywhere else. You fill out forms all the time. You take tests.
No, but in civilian life, is that how you got a job doing car repair?
I was working in a munitions plant where they were making boosters for shells. I was an inspector. And we all got laid off because they lost a contract with the government. And the men came back from night work to daytime. And I went to the shipyard to try to get a job. I didn't know anything. I went to school to go to college. I mean, Latin's not going to help you if you have to get a job. And so they said that I could go to school. And I forget the letters, but it was government run. And I could be a machinist, a draftsperson, a riveter, a welder. And when I went home and talked to my father, and I said, these are my choices. I can go to school and learn how to do these things. And he said, you could never be a machinist. That's why
I can just hear the click.
That's
Oh,
why,
yeah.
That's why I became a machinist, because my dad said I couldn't.
A bit of a dysfunctional relationship there.
I came from a dysfunctional family. However, I went to school and learned how to operate all the machines in the machine shop. In the meantime, the company I had worked for got the contract back, and they came and asked me to come back to work. And I told them I was going to school to be a machinist, toolmaker. And they said, when you finish your schooling and you come back, and you can either work at your old job as an inspector or you can work in the tool room. So when I got through learning all the machines in the machine shop, I went back to that company and they put me in the tool room. That's how I got that job.
So what were you using? Were you using a milling machine and a lathe and those kind of machines?
Yeah, everyone.
You can come over to my house because my husband is setting up his machine shop, and he's an engineer, but he's a frustrated machinist. So he's got a Bridgeport mill, and he just has a new lathe and a new old lathe, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's what I learned. I learned how to operate a lathe and a milling machine and a shaper and a grinder and yeah, I was to the point where I was going to learn how to harden the steel, and that's when I enlisted in the Army.
So then later on, when you tried to, after you got out of the Army, and the UAW wouldn't let you be,
Well-
they wouldn't let you be a machinist. You could have gone on. Could you have gone on the line, and just do assembly?
I would think so, but I didn't talk to the UAW. I talked to the woman in the employment place,
Ah.
where we went down to get our checks and for employment. She is the one that told me that the UAW did not allow women to set up their own jobs.
Okay, in the machine shop. I see,
Because-
yeah.
When I worked for Warren Webster, all they handed me was a time card and a blueprint. And I had to go to the storeroom and get the steel, make sure I could pick out the right kind of steel and the sizes and so on, and then get the job, make whatever they told me to make, my part of it anyway. And that was what I did.
My
So-
my husband may get rid of me and marry you, you know.
I could read, of course they taught me how to read blueprint, but I already knew because my mother was a dressmaker and she taught me how to make patterns. Same thing. So,
Never thought of that. You're
Hmm.
right.
Clearly you had a lot of ability though, because there's a lot of people who can't read a blueprint or a pattern at all, you know, it's just lines on a piece of paper, so
well,
clearly had a lot of mechanical ability.
yeah, I was lucky that my mother could teach me what she did, and I won't even go into all the things she taught me, but, and my father, my father was a very good machinist. And after he got over the fact that that's what I was going to be, he would talk to me about it. And he was a big help, because he was very good at it.
Did any of your brothers go into machining or anything like that?
Yes.
Become machinists?
Yes, my brother, older than me, when he went into the service, they sent him to University of Wisconsin, and they taught him machine shop work for airplanes, how to repair airplanes. So he was the only one. My other brothers had different things, but because I had graduated from that school or finished the course, and I knew all about the machines, it was all still fresh in my mind because I was working at it. That's the reason why my mechanical aptitude test was high.
Sure.
I mean, let's face it, if your father's a carpenter and you help him and you take a test for being a carpenter, it's going to,
Show
you
up.
know,
Yeah.
it'll show.
Sure.
Yeah.
It was just that, it was just the beginning of when women were going to start doing those things. But I never had harassment or anything when I worked in that machine shop. Ever. I really never did. The only thing is that when I worked in one place, they didn't like the fact that I didn't like the union. I still don't.
Well, my guess is, from the short time we've had to talk, you kind of made yourself like a man. And you kind of jumped right in. Women I've met that you get along with the best are the ones that jump right in and assume the role of what you're doing. And it's hard to distinguish because they're behaving just like your buddy would.
Mm-hmm.
And when they start acting like a woman, then it separates. And
Yeah, I really, I mean, whatever I've done without thinking of why I was doing it.
yeah,
Having all those brothers certainly helped. You know,
Sure.
you knew
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. My brothers helped me a whole lot. And as I say, my mother was a dressmaker, so she knew how to do these things, and my dad was a machinist. My grandfather was too. And all of those things. I forgot a lot, but I remember a lot.
I'm sure addressed with it today, a lot would come back too.
Hmm. I think so. I think so. Well, that's the way it was. And I am what I am, no matter what. Whether I became what I made myself become, or whether it was just happened, whichever.
Well, you had good company because when Queen Elizabeth, when she was still Princess Elizabeth, she was in the Royal Army and she was in Canada and she was a car mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
She was a mechanic.
Well, we had whacks that were at first echelon, and that would be to check the oil and check the tires and things like that. All of those, the bus drivers, they had to do all those things. It just happened that I was in a machine shop.
So first echelon was doing the drivers, were the drivers and the just checking the oil and the
Checking things like that.
and filling up the gas tank and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Second echelon would have been what?
I'm not even sure what it would be just better than that, you know,
Yeah.
just a little bit more. My third echelon was repairing the parts that went on the truck.
So,
And the fourth echelon was motor rebuilding.
okay. So you never got to rebuilding the motors?
No.
But you would turn the brakes and
Yeah.
rebuild
Yeah,
carburetors and stuff like that?
Yeah, I relined the brakes, I ground the valves, and Ford had the V8s, and their cylinder heads would warp, and so I could straighten them out on the surface grinder.
Oh,
And-
really? I didn't know you could do that.
We
You
did.
could mill it, but there's only so far you could mill it.
That's right. And
Well, yeah.
and we had a portable crankshaft grinder, so I could do that.
Hmm.
And I pretty much fixed all parts for them. I couldn't do all of that work because I didn't get a chance to. The first day that they put me in motor maintenance, the captain was not happy, did not want me there because it was all men. And the first thing he asked me to do was repair a water pump. I never saw a water pump. I had no idea what it was. That is not a machine shop thing. And he gave me a kit to put into this water pump. And when I took it apart, the part that was supposed to be rubber was plastic, and it was real crummy and dirty and pulled apart. And when I took that out and put the new one in, the captain thought that I was okay because I was not afraid to get my hands dirty.
Or break a fingernail.
Hey, my fingernails, let me tell you, I've always had good fingernails. They grow a 1/16 of an inch every week. We measure them.
So then you were okay, because you weren't
I
afraid.
was okay
You weren't
because-
you were going to carry your own weight. You didn't have to get
That's
other
just what
guys
we were
to-
talking about.
Yeah,
You
that's-
started to
well,
behave like
that's
a
true,
man.
because I could
Yeah.
lift the cylinder head back then, if it had to be moved. And,
75 pounds.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was no problem. But it was, I guess I just did everything because we had to at home. I was always with my brothers.
You know, I've always felt that those experiences that women had during the Second World War and also blacks, you know, really set the stage for the civil rights movement and whatnot, because there were so many average guys who could see that, you know, women could really pull their own weight and were really capable of doing these things, and so it defied the myths of the, you know, the little woman who was kind of helpless, and gave women a lot of self-confidence. And then later on in the 60s, after they'd had a lot of their families, they gave them the confidence to go back into the workplace, and made it harder for a lot of the men to say, no, women can't do this, because it was real obvious that they could.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't think I ever had a problem. I think everybody always knew that whatever it was, that I could do it. To this day.
Mm-hmm.
To this day. I've always been, I can unscrew a jar, I mean, I can do all those things without a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And people ask me to do it. They just figure I can do it. I can do anything, especially my family. They think I can do anything and everything.
Clearly you can.
I do.
So your husband, when he was from this area,
Mm-hmm.
and how long were you guys married? Or is he still alive?
No. My husband died in 1983.
So you've been on your own for a while.
Yeah. And he was a machinist to start with. He worked for a trailer, and then when they went out of business, of course, he never went back to machine shop work.
Was he supportive of you working?
Oh, yeah. He was supportive of anything I did. It didn't make any difference what it was. His mother never could do the things that I could do, so he was always in awe of the fact that I could do these things. I could darn a sock where you couldn't notice that it was darned. That to him was a big thing. And he knew what I could do in the Army because he was there. He was in the 4th echelon. But I never had a problem. It was, he worked around it too. I mean, I never had a problem working, no matter what hours I worked or where I worked. It didn't make any difference. He was supportive, yes.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
And my girls were too. I asked them first. No, I never had those problems. I don't really think I ever had a problem with things like that. Other problems, but never anything.
Well, don't sell yourself short. You probably were responsible for that kind of attitude in your family because of the way you were.
Yeah.
Had you been a willy-nilly, it probably wouldn't have worked. But you had a goal and you had certain things and you showed you could do it.
Mm-hmm.
People tend to rally around those people and behave in patterns that are supportive to that.
Yeah. I really try to do, even now, I try to do everything. I don't really like people to do things for me. Not at all.
But you send that message out, so I would imagine you tend to ward off people that want to do that.
I do. I know I do.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it irritates me.
Yeah, and, you know, men tend to be fixers instead of listeners. That's kind of a inborn thing, I guess. So the woman like you, you'd have to kind of hold on. She doesn't want it fixed. She wants to be heard. So sit back and wait till you're asked. I've got 2 daughters, and oh boy, I had a hard lesson for that because I just want to fix it. Now, when they got a problem, they come and see me.
Mm-hmm.
And then they ask me, well, how are we going to tell Mom? But that's a hard lesson to learn for us.
Yeah, as I said, I'm like my dad, but I'm also like my mother.
Yeah.
But more like, I look like my dad. Sometimes I act like my dad. There are a few things that he did that I don't do, but anyway.
Chew tobacco?
I never did chew tobacco, he did. He worked in cigar factories, we all smoked cigars. So, I never smoked cigarettes. I never drank.
Well, you're a tough old lady. I appreciate listening to you. That's
Yeah, it's
invigorating.
I'm more old than I am tough.
Well, you send a picture of being tough.
It's not tough, Dee. She's very, very capable.
That's true.
She's very competent and very capable.
Yeah.
Well, that's wrapped up in tough.
Yeah, my grandson says I'm smart. He'll ask me any question and I'll know the answer. What he says. If she's 44 or 45 years old, what does he know?
Do you know that the next interview is one day younger than you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
One
noticed that.
day.
Yeah.
There are so many of us in the same area, the same age. I checked the obituaries the other day, and more people are in their 80s and 90s than there are in other ages in the newspaper for dying. A lot of them are 90. I'm old.
How's your scores?
Hmm?
How do you score?
Well, I have 145 average in one league, and last year I had a 148 and 145 in two different leagues. This year I can't bowl in one league. I mean, I don't know why, but my high game this year was 232, and my high series was 565.
Wow.
You put me to shame.
Yeah.
We have people 90 years old bowling,
That's amazing, isn't it?
isn't it?
That's great.
And we look forward to bowling.
Hmm.
And we have one man in our league, and he's in his 90s, but you'd never ever know it. And we had women 94 years old bowling. So
That's awesome.
They're doing that now. That's good.
I think it went through a little phase where there weren't too many people bowling. I think it's coming back now with some of the younger people.
Well, the bowling alleys are really hurting right now, but a lot of the high schools have got really good bowlers
Yeah.
with 200 averages and so on.
Yeah.
I'm just happy to have a 145 average.
Good for you.
I'm also happy to get the trophies for high game and high series.
That's great.
There are other women that are my age, a year younger, or a year older, that bowl, and they do very well.
After you got out of the service, did you keep in touch with any of the other WACs?
Yeah, my army buddy, her name was Ruth Mahoney. Irish as Irish could be. And everybody in this world should have a friend like her. She was the most marvelous person that I ever knew. She loved her birthday. That was the happiest day of her life, of every year. And on her birthday, she sent her mother a bouquet of flowers. And Christmas was the second happiest day of her life. She passed on a couple of years ago, and yes, we corresponded all the time, and we went back and forth. Every time I went back to New Jersey, she lived in Wilmington, Delaware. She worked at DuPont, her and her husband, and then when they retired, they moved to Ocean City, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to go back to see my parents 3 or 4 times a year, if not more. And I used to always go to see her. the nicest person that you would ever want to meet. And even though, well, she'd been gone about 3 years now, and she kept in touch with some of the other WACs. We had one WAC that joined the reserves and was called in back for the Korean War. She made it a career.
I didn't ask you this, but now that you've mentioned it, were there groups that would form after the war in which the WACs would get together and reunions?
I think they did have groups like that, but I never did. My next door neighbor was an Army nurse here in Michigan, and we were out looking for work. The troops would go out together, and we went to Selfridge, but they didn't have anything for us there. And we decided we wanted to join an organization, so we went to the American Legion. And they said, oh, well, you can't join. It's only for men. You have to join the auxiliary. And I said, not me. And so we would not join any auxiliary, and they were, at that time, we couldn't find anything, so we didn't. I always figured if I could be in the service and do what I did and be there, why couldn't I be? Why not in the American Legion? What was so great that only men?
Well, there wasn't a reason, it was just the way it was.
Yep, it was just the way, it's just the way men are.
Ouch.
It was just the way it was. Men just happened to be part of the it. You're right, you're right.
I'll never forget when we went to the American Legion posted, we said we wanted to, Alice and I wanted to belong to the American Legion. They said, absolutely not. You can belong to the auxiliary.
The Clinton Township Kiwanis just integrated 5 or 6 years ago, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
There were no, you're a woman, this is just for men.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
It's hard breaking that first door down, and once you do it, just...
Yeah. I really didn't want to break any doors down, but I was fortunate in my
I
job.
beg your pardon? You didn't want to break them.
She didn't want to break
You didn't break them down, you kicked them down.
She just wanted to go through the door. She didn't want to have to break them. She just wanted to go in.
It all goes back. It all goes back to having so many brothers,
Yeah.
because we were equals,
Yeah.
you know. And I just
Were you in the middle?
I had 2 brothers older than me, and I had then I had 3 brothers and a sister and then another brother. My youngest one is a brother, and my sister is 10 years younger than me. My oldest brother was 4 years older than me. Was 4, and my brother Clifford was 2 years older. Anyway, so that's it. But there again, they always treated me as my brothers treated me and my mother, and my sister was too young, but they treated us like a queen. I can tell you that. They gave us most respect. Even my brothers that are alive today. They were always special to me and I was special to them. They always treated me with a lot of respect, and to this day, the ones that are alive still do.
Sounds like they made good husbands. It sounds like they would have made good husbands, treating their wives with respect.
They didn't like my husband.
They didn't, but no, were they good husbands themselves?
Your brothers.
Your brothers?
I had 2 brothers that were divorced. The other ones were really, yeah, as my sister-in-law said, I just wish that all people that are married would be as happy as Bill and And the one brother that was divorced never remarried. And the other one, well, he got married a couple of times. But he's got the right kind of a wife now, so she'll handle him. So. Anyway, so that makes it a happy marriage.
Gertrude, thank you very much for your sharing of your service time with us. I appreciate it very much. Very interesting.
It was.
Now, it wasn't all that bad, was it?
Not really, but as I said, I don't like people to do things for me, and I don't, it makes me feel uncomfortable. I know that I've done all these things, and I know that a lot of women haven't done what I've done. And it was easy for me, but I don't know why. But still, not too bad.
Well, we appreciate you sharing your story. It's, you know, a story we haven't heard.
It's one of the best.
Yeah, it's one of the good ones. It was a really good one. Yeah, and I learned a lot. And I finally learned why some of those barracks had bars on them, and why some of them didn't.
We had, the barracks that I was in, the WAC detachment was on a fork in the road, and headquarters was there. I must tell you this, we had a red-headed captain. Well, the first day that I went to Fort Oglethorpe in Georgia, that's where we had basic. And there's 300 women, civilians, lined up. We had just spent 2 days on a troop train going from New Jersey to Kentucky by way of Chicago. And she stood up there, the captain, and she said, tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock, the bugle is going to play reveille. And then 10 minutes after 6, you're going to fall out. She said, I don't care if you don't have any clothes on under your coat. But you better have your hair combed and lipstick on, because I'm not looking at 300 women with their hair uncombed and no lipstick. And that was, and you know, to this day, the first thing I do is comb my hair and put lipstick on when I get up in the morning.
Certainly set the tone, eh?
Yeah. And I told him we had MPs around the barracks. And they were not allowed to come in. Sometimes especially if the Air Corps was there, they were arrogant, let me tell you. And they would get into barracks one way or another. And we would have to take them out. As soon as we got them out to the MPs, the captain would come out and she would invite them into headquarters. And we would watch at the windows and wait for them to come out. And sometimes they didn't come out for hours. We had of course, you know, you had the gigs. And one week they didn't tell you if you got a gig until Friday morning, and when they called your place of work, and then you had to fall out in your fatigues, and we had high shoes. And if the girls that worked in the office, they didn't wear the high shoes, they wore high heel, they wore the heels. But like me, I worked in my fatigues, and I always worked in those shoes. I didn't happen to have a gig, but all of those that did had to march with the captain and a lieutenant, and they had to go on a tour, a walk. They had to walk. Gas masks and Class A uniforms on.
Boy.
And she walked them through Dunellen.
Oh dear.
Walked them through Dunellen. And they had to have the ambulance follow the girls, and they had to have, all the officers had to go with them. They had a couple of girls pass out. And they got lost. And when they got back to camp, it didn't take the Colonel Rutledge any time at all. She was transferred overseas.